After rising to become Roblox's biggest game ever, Dead Rails has lost almost everything, losing over 98% of its player base in just 8 months, with the game looking to be in a dire state. But how did a game which once broke records for its sheer popularity lose everything? Why couldn't Dead Rails hold on to the success it once had? This is the tragic downfall of Roblox Dead Rails. Now, to truly be able to understand this downfall, we must go back to the very beginning, with a small developer by the name of Rico Miller, who would be the creator of the legendary game we know today. Now, Rico Miller had previously developed the Night Shift experience, a survival horror where users would have to live through the night shift of a fast food restaurant. This created the building blocks for Dead Rails, with its mechanics and survival elements. Now, while the night shift experience would find some success, it was clear that Rico wanted to create something much bigger. And on the first day of 2025, the earliest version of Dead Rails would release, being an apocalyptic survival where players would have to utilize a train to escape to Mexico, facing zombies, cowboys, and random anomalies with a team of up to 4 players. These mechanics would create a game that players absolutely love, with Dead Rails' enjoyability coming from its simplistic yet addictive gameplay loop, where players had the creative freedom to fully customize how they approach the game, and the looming challenge of reaching 80 kilometers being something to consistently bring players back to the game. And slowly but surely, Dead Rails would gain traction, rising to pull tens of thousands of active players in just the first few weeks. For the first month, Dead Rails would not see any major updates, due to it being in its alpha state, seeing minor changes like the banjo and small bug fixes. During this month, the developers gave players time to enjoy the core gameplay loop, because this was only the calm before the storm of one of the greatest legacies to ever face Roblox. It's now February, and Dead Rails dropped its very first update, seeing 10 new major additions, being armor, snake oil, molotovs, new melee weapons, along with Xbox and mobile support. These changes would be loved by fans as they simply added more variety to the gameplay loop, with the developers ensuring that players would have a unique experience each playthrough. It was at this point when Dead Rails had established a strong community, now being one of the most popular games in all of Roblox. Devout fans who were addicted to playing through the game in unique ways. Be sure to remember this, because little did people know it would be the same issue to completely kill off the game. So subscribe, because things are only downhill from here. It's now mid-February, and this would be known as the start of a golden age for Dead Rails. Bonds were just added as a new form of currency, allowing players to find them in-game and purchase permanent upgrades. This would reinforce the idea of replayability, rewarding those who came back time and time again. Some other changes would include new guns, unique church items, and general in-game patches. This made it evidently clear that the developers had a dedication to making the game as enjoyable as possible, being one of the few games that had virtually no pay to win. The devs would also promise to add major content changes each week. This would be proven when Dead Rails would see one of its biggest updates ever, Classes, releasing on the 27th of February. Now, this update would allow users to purchase and equip distinct classes, each offering unique buffs and starting gear. These would include the Doctor, giving bandages and allowing for the ability to heal teammates, the Ironclad starting with a full set of armor, the Alamo giving train defense materials, and the Arsonist granting 4 Molotovs and doubling fire damage. These classes would be permanent, which gave players other incentives for grinding out the game. A global leaderboard was also added to display total wins. This added a new level of competition where players could compete to see who was the very best. This, along with the core gameplay loop, would cause Dead Rails to reach a massive milestone, 100 million visits, as it was now when the game would start to be noticed amongst the Roblox community. And while things seemed to be only up from here, players would be unaware of the downfall which would ensue. It's now March, and this would be around the point where Dead Rails' most dedicated fans would theorize over one thing: the lore. After all, the world was so mysterious, and with only a vague description about an American virus taking place in 1899, players would look for more subtle clues presented in the overworld, such as notes, architecture, and different signage, all in an effort to try to uncover the mysteries of the world. March would also be the time when Dead Rails would begin to finally get the attention of large content creators, with YouTubers like Flamingo helping bring the game to new highs. Now, while the game was doing well, it was obvious that the Dead Rails fanbase were looking for something big to change up the gameplay loop. As often, after a few weeks of an update, the game would begin to get stale, and this major update would happen on the 7th of March, with the release of the Tesla Lab. Now, the Tesla Lab was added as a new location, featuring a rundown lab where players would have to fight through a horde of zombies to face a custom boss, Nikola Tesla, a massive robot anomaly. Upon completion, players would obtain a secret ending. This update would also see the Electrocutioner, one of the most powerful weapons in the entire game, unlocked from the lab. Environmental effects would also drop, seeing storms which could damage those not protected, releasing of course with the lightning rod, which would alleviate the effects. The priest class would also release, being equipped with holy water and crucifixes. Some other small changes would include flopping while dead and new lore additions. At this point, Dead Rails was now the most popular game in all of Roblox, averaging hundreds of thousands of active players at any given moment, with its quick growth astounding the Roblox community. And while the gameplay loop would eventually get repetitive, things like the many different endings and unlockable classes gave fans something to grind for. Due to this, March would be one of the best times in the history of Dead Rails, with the popular trend of speedrunning being who could complete the game in the shortest amount of time dominating the scene. Glitches would also become prevalent in the community. Now, over the next few weeks, Dead Rails would make some necessary changes, seeing a new mission system which gave tasks for players to complete for bonds and challenge stars. 7 new classes were also added, being the Conductor, giving users a faster train, Zombie, Vampire, High Roller, which gave users more money, Survivalist, and Miner, with the Conductor and High Roller being considered the best. Dead Rails would also see a 10 bond reward for those who were skilled enough to complete the game. Now, it was at this point where the developers would start to slow down on updates. Despite their promise of weekly changes, major updates would often take upwards of 3 weeks to drop. This would cause the game to lose a significant portion of its audience in between updates, with a large percentage of the player base only coming back for major content changes. This would irk the community, as many found that the update quality wasn't as good as before, and while this wouldn't be an issue for now, it would certainly be one of the biggest problems to completely kill off the game. Now, while the wait was long, it would be worth it, as on the 28th of March 2025, there would be a change which would completely alter the world of Dead Rails. The town of Sterling, a secret late-game town containing heavy lore, but more importantly a jade crystal. At first, this would seem to be unimportant, but behind this town lay a dark secret, the mine, which players would have to navigate to obtain 4 jade tablets. This mine would be considered to be the most difficult area in the entire game, due to its complex layout and high amount of monsters and skeletons. However, those who managed to complete it would be rewarded with the Jade Sword, a weapon which could revive those killed by it to fight for the wielder. This meant that whoever could complete this town was essentially guaranteed a win, due to the high amount of loot that it would give. Players would generally consider this to be a positive change. While many didn't think that the long wait was worth it, this update would bring massive amounts of attention to Dead Rails. In addition to the town of Sterling, the update would also see Nightmare Mode, a harsher difficulty game mode unlocked after 1 regular win. Nightmare Mode would add harsher conditions, less loot, no regen, and tougher enemies, rewarding those skilled enough to complete it with significantly more bonds. This update would give a new level of challenge to those who are finding the game to be too easy, allowing for enjoyability for all levels of players. Another small change that would be added would be ore deposits, seeing gold and silver nuggets scattered along the tracks, encouraging mining, especially with the miner class. Wolves could now be tamed and zombies would have different variants. Players would begin to notice Dead Rails striving towards making fewer higher quality updates, which would change the game in massive ways, with updates consistently putting the game at the very top of Roblox. And as long as the updates were good, players wouldn't get bored. What could go wrong? It's now April, and Dead Rail's very first update would be an April Fool's event, introducing 2 new game modes: horsing around, allowing users to unlock the horse class, where they could fight alongside their horses to gain new abilities. Fool's Gold will also be introduced, where gold chunks spawned as loot, and selling them triggered random effects, with the main one being the rare April Fool's Key, which unlocked a hidden secret house. And while this update was decent, players felt that the time in between updates was getting longer and longer. At this point, most of the player base had experienced all of the enjoyable parts of the game. Fatigue was starting to set in, and worse yet, games like Grow a Garden were starting to rise in popularity. But an update would eventually come, adding 4 new classes to the game, being the Musician, allowing users to heal each other with the Banjo, Packmaster, who was given 3 tamed wolves on spawn, and the Werewolf, with the Werewolf being considered the best class in the entire game due to its 2x speed, health, and damage buffs during the night time. The game would also see a physical shop system, 3 weekly challenges, and new major balancing additions. However, one of the changes in this update would go a step too far, and that change would be limiting how many items users could buy. While it seems small, this nerf would give the game more hate than it had ever seen before, with the player base viewing it as a huge anti-fun mechanic, limiting freedom and player creativity, as those who wanted to stock up on large amounts of ammo in the end game would be completely stopped. Change would receive so much hate that in less than a day the developers would completely reverse it. And while this issue was rather small, it would hint to something much bigger: player division. It was about now where large amounts of the Dead Rail's player base were content with the current state of the game, not wanting major changes that would force them to adapt to different metas, whereas the other portion of the Dead Rail's community wanted consistent updates, so that runs wouldn't feel as repetitive each time. This would mean that update or no update, the game would lose players and receive backlash from either side. Now, despite this, an update would come, an update so big that it would cause Dead Rails to break records: the Easter event, which the developers would praise to be the biggest Easter egg hunt in Roblox history. The main premise of this update would be 2 random eggs hidden around the map, with the first squad to find them having their names permanently in the game. Outside of the egg hunt, the update would introduce the Extravaganza mode, seeing random egg spawns around the map, which would hatch into things like outlaws, zombies, and even werewolves, which would fight by your side during encounters. However, the biggest change in this update would be the Easter Bunny boss, a replacement to the original encounter, which would require users to utilize their egg force to defeat one of the hardest enemies the game had ever seen. Upon defeating this boss, users would receive the Egg Slinger class, a limited time class which spawned a free egg every 2 minutes. This event would bring Dead Rails to a milestone which only the greatest of greats could achieve: 1 million concurrent players, being the 6th game to ever achieve this milestone. This would blow the minds of the Roblox community, as just 4 months prior, no one even knew what Dead Rails was, with the explosion of the game being the fastest in Roblox history. Now, despite this notoriety, the truth was that Dead Rails was at its very peak, a game held together by players that the devs hoped wouldn't eventually get bored. It was obvious that Dead Rails was a ticking time bomb. With new games on the horizon threatening Dead Rails' spot at the very top, it was clear that Dead Rails needed to maintain their player base, and unfortunately they did not, because over the next few weeks the game would not see a single update, causing Dead Rails to lose over 500,000 active users, reaching a low that the game had not seen since before its rise. Eventually, however, an update would drop, version 0.13, releasing on the 2nd of May. This update would add train classes, being permanently unlockable trains which would give users special upgrades, including the Gold Rush, Cattle Car, and Armored, being slow but highly durable. Similar to classes, these could also be purchased with bonds. A bank system would also drop, where users would have to find a code to unlock the vault. The update would also see droppable money, looting, and a gun rework. Now, despite train classes being a long-awaited change, players were generally disappointed with this update, because now people who spent Robux on bonds would have an even bigger advantage. But the main issue would be the sheer amount of time this update would take to release, not even being considered remotely worth the wait. But now there would be an even bigger issue. issue, because during Dead Rail's lowest moments, there would be a game which would have the biggest explosion Roblox had ever seen: Grow a Garden, with it in previous months only having a fraction of Dead Rail's player base, and not seeming to pose much of a threat. But now the tides would turn, with Grow a Garden rising to reach 11 million active players. This would be a massive nail in the coffin to Dead Rails, as a large portion of their audience completely abandoned the game for Grow a Garden. But little did players know, things would only get much worse. If you're enjoying, consider subscribing, because we still have a long journey ahead. It's now late May, and Dead Rail's version 0.14 would finally drop, introducing the Milkman class, giving buffs to those who consumed milk. The update would also see Scorched Earth mode, where it would rain flammable acid straight out of the sky. We would also see a new weapon system, along with a potions and brewery update, utilizing many of the new liquids added to the game. Now this update would be aimed to give more player freedom, making the game more of a sandbox so runs wouldn't feel as repetitive. While Dead Rails at this point had lost over 60% of its audience, it was still decently popular, averaging a few 100,000 players. But sadly, this was dwindling by the day, with many YouTubers making videos talking about the diminishing player base, and of course, speculation on the next major update, which would take almost a month to release. Now the update which players were anticipating would drop in early June, being purely in terms of content, one of the biggest updates the game had ever seen, introducing a new area called the Stillwater Prison, a rundown prison abandoned after the apocalypse began. This area would grant users late game items for fighting prisoners and guards. Along with this, a new boss would be added, the Goliath, giving users the ability to pull the all-powerful Excalibur upon completion. This weapon would be able to one-shot most enemies, giving users a huge advantage in the end game. The update would also include 3 new classes, being the Hunter, who spawns with the crossbow, President, who spawns with a soldier to defend him, and Demolitionist, who's given TNT items. Now the main aspects of this update would be absolutely love, and that was not all, as the change would also see 3 new items, being the Bear Trap Landmine and Gunpowder Barrel, not to mention 3 new weapons, which would be the Crossbow, Elephant Rifle, and Blunderbuss. Purely in terms of content, this would be Dead Rail's biggest change. However, unfortunately, it would do nothing to alleviate the wound that the game had incurred, as despite this update, the game wouldn't see even a fraction of the player base it once got. This would lead to a new issue, developer burnout, where now that the game had lost most of its player base, the developers would be disinterested to work as hard on their game, as the reward for putting out good updates would be less and less as players slowly left the game. What would prove this would be the next change that Dead Rails released, being one of the laziest updates seen yet, adding 3 new train classes into the game, including the Passenger, Ghost, and Wooden, and that was quite literally it. A month of waiting led to one of the most underwhelming updates ever. This made it clear to players that the devs were done dedicating their time to putting out massive changes just for players not to play them, because regardless of if an update dropped, the game would inevitably lose players. Not to mention games like Steal a Brainrot and 99 Nights in the Forest would begin to pop off, with Dead Rails now not even being in the top 10 most popular games. It felt like the future of the game was absolutely hopeless. July is now here, and this would be the worst month in Dead Rail's history, with version 0.16 dropping, adding sprinting, and new weekly challenges, which players would again criticize to be another lazy update. It was at this point where the game hadn't seen a big change in over a month, with the Stillwater Prison being the last major content update, and players were hopeful that the devs might finally release something big to alleviate the boring and repetitive gameplay loop. Unfortunately, this change would never come, as the only change to release in the entirety of July would be a low-effort 4th of July update, which would drop 3 new classes, including the King, Knight, and Tycoon, which would grant boosts for having more money. Outside of that, the update would see very minor changes, including the Firework Gun, Bottle Rocket, and VC and Pro lobbies. It was also around this point where the developers would mention that they were beginning to pull away from the game, mentioning their burnout of making updates. Along with this, on the 7th of July, Rico Miller would post a poll asking players the simple question of why they were quitting the game. Now, the biggest issue to be revealed would of course be the repetitive gameplay loop, with the most interesting aspect of the game being to speculate about future updates. Updates that would of course never come. But now let's look at the current version of Dead Rails. Looking today, Dead Rails averages 20 to 50,000 active users versus the 1.5 million it was seeing just a few months ago, with it being almost 3 months since the last major update. The sad truth is that Dead Rails is a game which has endured one of the shortest lifespans seen on Roblox, with it being the top game 1 month and completely dead the next. It feels like Roblox is steering towards a new direction where developers who focus on longevity and methodical player growth get beaten out by those who make low-effort games, which follow trends and formulaic ideas. The next video to be released on this channel will look much deeper into this issue, and will be my biggest yet, so be sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching.